Hi, I'm Sheila Guillotine, and this is the Simsbury Woman. The United States has been involved in the longest war in its history, 17 years. Unlike some of the wars of the past, the two world wars, for instance, public sentiment is, to say the least, mixed. In fact, the vast majority of people in this country are hardly aware that war is still being waged. Add to that the fact that our current military is comprised completely of volunteers who make up only 1% of the entire population. This long war has consequences, and our veterans who return, often wounded, physically and/or psychologically, do not get the kind of assistance they should get, considering what they've given. With the failure of government, private organizations try to fill the gaps. One such initiative is based out of the Farmington Valley Health District that serves towns in the Farmington Valley, including Simsbury. It's called Resilience Grows Here, and my guest today will explain just what this does and why its work is so important. So please welcome Leesa Philippon and Justine Ginsberg. Before we start on the actual topic, Leesa, tell me how you got involved in this work.
I was brought on to Resilience Grows Here in July of 2017. I have a past history of, I am a veteran, I am a Gold Star mother.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And I'm a mother of two Marines, my son that gave his life in Iraq, and then my younger son also was in the Marine Reserves. I come from a military family, a very strong military family, so that's my heart. And I was blessed with this job in July to start advocating for our veterans and bringing hope in some pretty hopeless situations.
Well, thank God there are people like you around. Justine, how did you get involved? I know you're primarily involved with the health district, so tell us how you got into resilience.
So I started working for the Farmington Valley Health District 4 years ago. My background, I'm a registered nurse by training, so I came on as the community health coordinator, basically coordinating and delivering all of the public health programming that goes out into the community, so the 10 towns of the Farmington Valley. One of the things we know for sure in public health is that our primary responsibility is to target populations that are at greatest risk, and we do a lot of work in chronic disease, disease prevention, health promotion, but one of the big gaps is mental health. And in my background as a nurse, I really did see the gap in the public health sector of working with mental health issues and reducing the stigma. So we were very fortunate 3 years ago to receive a grant from the Movember Foundation, which funnily enough is actually an Australian-based organisation, and I didn't actually know it at the time when we applied for the grant, that was looking at demographics within our communities that are most at risk. So inner city boys, and men of colour and of Native American background, and also our veterans. And interestingly enough, the Farmington Valley Health District has a very high number of veterans living amongst us, many of whom we don't actually know are veterans. They don't self-identify.
Really? Why?
Stigma. We have a lot of issue with.
I mean, I knew that was true in the Vietnam War, but that is still true?
Stigma continues to be an issue amongst our veterans. You know, we are more than happy to sign up our young men and young women. It's actually only 1% of the population that actually step up to serve. And they go and they do our country the most incredible service, but when they come home, it's 99% of us who don't serve almost don't really want to have to deal with the repercussions of their service. And the repercussions are not just physical injury, but it's psychological and moral injury. Most of the community just don't understand. They don't understand the depth and the breadth. And it's like anything, if we don't understand something, we're a little hesitant to step in and to help. And mental health to begin with has an enormous stigma. So we created Resilience Grows Here as an opportunity for a public health district to begin the conversation about mental health to begin the conversation about how does that 99% that are here at home and don't serve actually step up and do our part for the 1% who do serve.
Okay. Now, it's a nationwide organization, though. I mean, we have a little bit in Connecticut, but it is actually a nationwide
Resilience Grows Here
program.
hopefully will become.
Okay.
So the Movember Foundation grant, the Making Connections grant, which is supported by the Prevention Institute out of Oakland, California, is actually a nationwide grant.
Okay.
So the Movember Foundation raises money throughout the world. They have, I think it's 18 countries that they actually provide sponsorship for men's health. And the Making Connections grant went into the 5 developed countries across the globe. So Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK and the US.
Okay.
And Movember has invested an awful lot of money in working to address the mental health challenges that men face within our communities.
Okay, I have to ask, although you're going to kill me.
No.
Why men? We have women who serve.
Absolutely we do. And a little bit like the pink...
Obviously.
Absolutely. You know, a little bit like the Pink Ribbon campaign was developed to address breast cancer and has been incredibly successful in raising awareness about breast cancer and the need for women to have mammograms and to have early detection. Men's mental health is one of those taboo subjects across the world, and foundations like the Movember Foundation, which specialise in men's health, again like the Pink Ribbon Foundation specialise in women's health, decided that really we needed to draw attention to this problem. Now, that being said, Resilience Grows Here never would turn away a female veteran. In fact, we have female veterans working with us as members of our steering committee, and we equally try to serve the female veterans within our population, but being honourable to our funders, who is a men's mental health initiative, it really is, that's its primary role.
Okay. Now, how did you go about deciding, because mental health has sort of become, I don't know, the basket into which every problem is thrown. And how do you go about identifying, and you've also got the Veterans Administration, which as far as I can tell, does less and less all the time, but you must have to coordinate with them, or do you not have to coordinate with them? Are you just literally filling in a gap?
Well,
sorry about that.
No, and you know what? It is unfortunately one of the harsh realities that we need to deal with in mental health, and we have amazing affiliations with other providers of mental health services within both Connecticut, across the USA. The VA is a very heavily funded organisation federally.
Okay, if it's so heavily funded, then how come it's so inefficient?
That is a question I think we would be very happy to have a clear and decisive answer to.
It truly is heavily funded? I mean, what we hear when we watch the news is that, you know, funding's been cut and veterans are waiting months and months and months to get an appointment, to get in, which is probably true. It is true. Then where's the money going? Okay, sorry about that.
I wish we had a clear answer to that. What we do know is that the most effective mental health initiatives are born in communities. We know that veterans return to communities, they don't return to programs. And we know that the most effective programming for our veterans and their families is programming that addresses their needs.
Okay.
Large bureaucracies, unfortunately, like any bureaucracy, there's more red tape than you can point a stick at.
Sure.
And we end up wasting an awful lot of time and resources dealing with the red tape, which is why organisations like Resilience Grows Here are born, where we try to cut through that red tape. It's not about, do you qualify for a program? Are you eligible for a program? Did you serve in the right period of time? Did you serve enough days overseas? Were you deployed? Were you not deployed? Were you active duty?
So those
are you
are all
reserve?
considerations that veterans who are going to the veterans, I say I didn't know that. Okay, so Leesa, I mean, what kinds of things then, I mean, it makes sense that within a community, that's going to be where you'll be most effective. But is there some reason why you said Connecticut has an extremely high volume of veterans in comparison to other areas? Is there some reason why?
I think we were just speaking to the Farmington Valley
Okay.
as many that we're not aware of.
Okay. Not the country as a whole.
Exactly.
Okay.
But we do have our veterans, and we need to address their needs and concerns and those of their families as well.
So how do you even, I mean, as a layperson, if I guess I'll use that word, I mean, how do you even know if you didn't know someone was deployed? I mean, you don't want to go around asking personal questions,
right?
Do you?
Exactly. Well, it's our hope that families will hear about us and reach out to us. We also are becoming affiliated with churches, social work departments. We are just trying to reach out, putting signs up at grocery stores, letting the citizens know that we are here and we are willing to stand by their veteran and their family and guide them through whatever process is necessary to help them receive the resources that they need.
Right.
You know, unfortunately, there is so much stigma in society surrounding veterans. I mean, unfortunately, the media is responsible for creating a specific stereotype about what it is to be a veteran. I mean, not only do we almost glorify and glamorize warfare, we have created this pop culture that represents a veteran or a veteran's experience that is not reality. You know, we see when something goes wrong in the community, if you know, we've just lived through yet another experience of a tragic loss in a school. You know, we see these sorts of events occurring, and if by any chance one of those affiliated with any of these events is a veteran, the media takes that and blows that up into a stigma that is absolutely not true. But we then have an entire cadre of veterans at home that don't want to step up and say, you know what, I'm struggling. You know what, I can't sleep at night. You know what, I'm haunted by the moral injury of what I had to do in the name of this country. They don't want to self-identify because they're up against what the media has portrayed them to be. And it could not be more inaccurate. And there is guilt associated with families in asking for help. Families often don't step forward. They don't say, you know what, my husband is struggling, my son is struggling, because in their mind they've paid the ultimate price in serving this country. Now we just have to hope it's all going to get better. And when it doesn't, they don't know where to go.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact, and I suppose this has something to do with the apathy of our audience, but the fact that, I mean, unlike the world wars, where if you asked someone, where are we fighting, you know, they could tell you, you know, my husband's in, you know, Germany, my husband's in France, my husband's in Belgium. I would be willing to bet 90% of the people couldn't find Afghanistan on a map. Do you think the fact that it's so far away and such an alien environment has something to do with the attitude towards these people coming back? Like, what were you doing over there anyway? Like it was their fault. A
recent study among young adults from 17 to 35 was conducted, and of those, only 47% were able to name the 4 branches of the military.
Really?
Only 17% were able to add on the Coast Guard as being our warrior protectors as well.
Really?
So there is just a nonchalance that I feel is developing among the nation. I was thinking this morning, when we see on television, we see the reunions of our troops coming home and the wonderful reunions, and we watch with smiles on our faces and this peace in our heart. Everything is good now. They're home safe. God bless them. And we turn off our TVs.
Right.
Well, then it begins for those families and the veterans. Maybe not immediately, but their journey and their battlefield at home begins when that TV goes off and we turn our backs and go about our business. They
Yeah.
have to deal with the effects of war that come home.
One of the things that you had said, which we talked a little bit about before, was the moral price that some of these young people pay. I mean, it's one thing to shoot a gun at a target. It is quite another thing to actually kill a human being. I happen to be watching, we don't watch a lot of television, but I happen to be watching an old MASH episode. And it was one where, you know, the American who was wounded and the person who he had shot was in the bed next to him, and suddenly, you know, there was, you know, now why did I do that? I mean, why is this enemy? And the fact of killing a human being seems not necessarily to weigh on everyone equally, but there are some who who seem to take that, and I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, does anyone deal with that?
Well, we feel that those effects are going to come home with anyone from a traumatic situation. And it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to hit them. The moral injury is very real. They can't even fall asleep because of the moral injury, how it impacts their souls, within their souls. And then they also deal with the guilt of the survivor's guilt. They came home and their battle buddy didn't.
Oh,
You know,
right.
we do such an amazing job in this country of training warriors. America has possibly or arguably one of the most proficient and magnificently trained armed services. And these young men and young women, when they're deployed, are able to perform superhuman feats. I mean, you want to talk about the very nature of resilience. The nature of resilience is a young man or a young woman deployed in the middle of nowhere, in harm's way 24 hours a day. They get up, they go to work, they defend their brothers and sisters, they fight in the name of this country. They go back to their bunk, they go to sleep, they get up the next day, and they do it again and again and again. And Sheila, like you suggested before, we have a theatre of war at the moment that we have never seen before. 17 years of continuous warfare.
Yeah. In a place that we don't really even know why we're there.
And this is so foreign to your average man, woman, and child living in Simsbury or in East Granby or in Avon. We go about our everyday life. Our everyday lives aren't altered by this.
Yeah.
It is the families and the loved ones of that 1% whose lives are altered. And we don't see them. They're the invisible people. We're there when they go away, and then we're there when they come back. And then, as Leesa beautifully said, we think, great, you're home, fantastic.
It's all over.
Everything's great, it's all over. But we train, we watched an amazing documentary recently called Thank You for Your Service. And one of the psychiatrists who worked at a naval base in Japan receiving home our veterans beautifully said, we train our men and women to deploy. We do not train them to come home. We equip them to become warriors, but we do not retrain them to become civilians. We just hope it's going to happen. And how can it happen without the assistance and the tender, loving care and the patience of their loved ones and their communities?
As I understand it, I mean, if they don't get help, that can rip a family apart.
Absolutely.
I mean, you must have seen that.
Oh, we see it time and time again. And what happens is we don't intervene early enough, recognizing that post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not a disorder, it's the normal reaction to the most abnormal circumstances. Now, post-traumatic stress does not just come in warfare. It happens to men and women every single day of the year in this country at home. But the reaction to that is a normal reaction to trauma and stress. And what would happen if, God forbid, one of us was involved in an armed hold-up, we were a victim of that, we would go and seek counselling, and we would have a certain number of sessions with a psychologist, we might have, certain forms of alternative therapy, and we're supported in that. You're encouraged to do that. The fact that you go and defend our country, the fact that you are prepared to lay down your life in the name of this country, and when you come home, if you ask for help, somehow you're considered to be weak.
Yeah, I was just thinking, there are dozens of, as I said, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I can think on, one hand, the TV shows that glorify the military, and of course they're all, everything is always works out perfectly in the end. And then they come home, and it seems to me, it's almost as if you haven't trained the families. And how does the wife, who gets back someone who is not maybe the same person who went away, how does she deal with that?
Well, a lot of times she avoids talking about it because she doesn't want to bring shame to her husband.
Really?
And so they withdraw. Then we're also looking at a higher level of family violence that comes into play, alcohol and drug abuse. The children exhibit behavioral issues in school. It's a pretty vicious cycle that had been caught earlier on. I think that we would be able to deal with it better. And to be more accepted that our veterans go and get the help that they need and not have to wait 6 weeks for an appointment.
Yeah.
When they need
Now,
it.
how do we educate the public? I mean, it seems to me that's something that needs to be done. As I said, when my grandparents, were, when they were fighting the World War, you knew why they were gone, and they were welcomed home as heroes, and it was something to be proud of. And yet now it seems like it is completely flip-flopped, and people are almost afraid to say they were deployed.
Exactly. I feel that it is time for the communities to step up. I wrote a little thing this morning, if you don't mind me reading it.
No, please.
I said, our veterans are coming home from war with any combination of physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual injuries, all normal responses to abnormal circumstances. And those symptoms of war change not only the veteran, but they change us and the communities to which they return. Because our warriors are willing to sacrifice their lives for us, we need to put our boots on the ground in the communities when they come home.
Okay, and that's beautiful, but it seems like it is completely ignored. You don't hear about it in your churches. You think that would be one place where, there would at least be some recognition.
Well, that's why RTH is being developed, is so that we can bring this education to the communities and help them to become engaged with America's sons and daughters that are coming home.
Well, communities are actually the solution. I mean, we were again watching another short snippet on a YouTube clip that talks about communities being the medicine. Communities are the medicine. They are the things that are going to right this. But everyone plays a role. Every person in the community plays a role. If you are a store owner, you have a role to play with veterans. If you offer services, you have a role to play with veterans. A wonderful example, art therapy is incredibly useful in dealing with post-traumatic stress. If you run an art program for children and accept payment for, running art classes over the summer, why don't you offer a free art class for veterans?
Really? What a good
Everybody
idea.
has the power within them to offer something. Now, these young men and women have offered their lives. They sign, regularly our veterans say, we sign a blank check to the country and it's payable with my life. Leesa's own son paid the ultimate price.
Yes.
It's not a lot to ask a community to step up, and it's not just about money. It's not just about a check that goes into a vortex. It's about each of us being accountable for helping our neighbour. It's about talking about this and making this a conversation that anybody can have anywhere. We should be talking about this in cafes and restaurants and schools and workplaces. We should be surrounding these young men and women and their families with as much love and tolerance and acceptance as we possibly can.
It seems we're also making a distinction, probably because it's easy, between someone who is physically, has a physical injury that you can actually see, as opposed to, oh, he looks perfectly healthy or she looks perfectly healthy, what's her problem? And how do you deal with something like that? Because the emotional scars can be just as devastating, but we don't see them.
Well,
and we also don't tolerate them, it seems to me.
Well, ultimately, from a public health perspective, which is where Resilience Grows Here was born, we know that the silent injuries, the silent mental health struggles that people in our community have are the predisposition to chronic disease. We know that people who have had adverse childhood experiences, who have had adulthood traumas, are far more likely to end up with chronic diseases. And from a prevention standpoint, we would be negligent if we did not step up and start naming mental health as the next enormous foray of public health, and it's fundamental to who we are. Our own mental well-being determines everything about our life. It determines how well we can work, how well we can parent, how well we can work with our communities, what it is that we can achieve, how healthy we are. All of that is about maintaining a human being's health and well-being.
Yeah, it did. It had never occurred to me before, but are you literally saying that if you are suffering from a psychological trauma, that can ultimately more easily lead you to a physical disease?
Absolutely, because if you don't have the opportunity to deal with and to be given the tools and the access to tools without prejudice, without judgment, to the appropriate assistance in dealing with the ramifications of that trauma, how can anything else in your life be easy?
Okay, well, that's a little alarming. It's actually
a very simple solution. If we dealt with mental health and mental well-being as easily and as non-judgmentally as we deal with a woman's need to have a mammogram, nobody questions that. We say, you know what, my mammogram, I'm actually having mine tomorrow.
Okay.
But nobody questions that.
Okay.
Why is mental health screening and mental health checks not part of our yearly and annual physical?
Well, there is probably an answer, but we're going to have to wait to find out. As you can see, this is an extremely complex subject. In fact, we have so much more to cover that we will be filming a second program on this subject. That show will spend a lot more time on what each of us can do to help. We'll discuss the kinds of help we can offer to veterans and to the families of veterans, and also what we can do as members, as you say, of the community. I hope we've informed our viewers today of the crisis which many of our veterans face, especially the ones we don't realize are struggling. We also hope that our viewers will consider what they might be able to do to help. I want to thank our guests and all our viewers, and please have a happy and a healthy day. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.